You were never meant to escape. That job, that degree, that 401k, all of it's bait in a system that was engineered to keep you broke, tired, and obedient. And here's the proof. 63% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 44% can't cover a $400 emergency. Meanwhile, the top 1% now control over 32% of the nation's wealth, up from just 7% in 1980. That's not hard work. That's design. Because every policy, every price hike, every crisis is a wealth transfer event. You're not falling behind because you made bad choices. You're falling behind because the system is a machine, and your poverty is its fuel. Let me show you how deep it goes. 10. They sell you college like it's a ladder. But it's a debt trap with no escape clause. Let's talk about the single biggest scam that's been normalized for an entire generation: college. You were told it's the golden ticket, the key to upward mobility. Just get your degree, take out a loan, grind for 4 years, and you'll climb the ladder to the middle class or beyond. But that ladder? It's missing half the rungs. Because what you actually bought was one of the most predatory financial products in American history. As of 2025, total student loan debt in the U.S. has crossed $1.78 trillion, spread across 43.6 million borrowers. And unlike credit card debt or even mortgages, this debt doesn't go away. You can't discharge it in bankruptcy. You can't walk away from it. You die, it dies. And sometimes not even then. Your family might still be on the hook. Meanwhile, the cost of college has increased nearly 1,200% since the 1980s, while wages for young adults have barely budged. And let's get even more specific. The average student borrower now graduates with over $38,000 in debt. But if they went to a for-profit college, which disproportionately targets low-income students, the average is even higher, and the degree often carries less market value. Why? Because the Department of Education and Wall Street-backed student loan servicers like Navient and Nelnet helped rewrite the rules, making interest and deferment periods long and opaque, so you end up paying 2 to 3 times what you borrowed. And while the government pauses repayments during election cycles for headlines, the interest still compounds. The rich? They use 529 plans, real estate equity or trust funds. They don't take loans, and if they do, it's strategic. Tax arbitrage, not survival. You were told education is an investment, but the system designed it to become intergenerational shackles, targeting the poor under the guise of empowerment. 9. You work a full-time job, but you can't afford to live, and that's by design. Here's a brutal truth you're not supposed to admit out loud. Having a job doesn't mean you're safe anymore. In fact, it often means you're just poor in a slightly more organized way. Over 60% of Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck, even those making over $100,000 a year. That's not a budgeting problem. That's a system failure. Because the minimum wage hasn't been raised federally since 2009, it's still $7.25 an hour, while inflation has erased 40% of that purchasing power. Meanwhile, rent has gone up 30 to 50% in most major cities since 2020. Food prices? Up 24% since the pandemic. Medical costs? Astronomical. You're spending more to survive than you ever have, and your wages haven't kept up. But that's not because your employer can't afford to pay you more. It's because wage suppression is baked into the corporate profit model. In fact, between 2020 and 2023, over 53% of price increases in consumer goods were due to corporations raising prices beyond their cost increases, what economists now call greedflation. They tell you just work harder or get a second job. But the system is built so your labor barely covers survival, let alone wealth accumulation. And if you do manage to scrape together a few $100s, one emergency, one tire blowout, one doctor's bill, one missed shift, and you're back to zero. Think about that. You're employed and still drowning. Because the modern job market is a treadmill, not an escalator. It's motion without progress. The rich don't sell labor. They buy it cheap. You're the product. And the longer they can keep you running without building equity, without owning anything, the longer you're trapped in the game. You think you're shopping freely, but monopoly capitalism controls every dollar you spend. You ever feel like no matter where you shop, you're paying more and getting less? That's not a coincidence. That's the result of corporate consolidation so extreme, it's practically a silent cartel. In sector after sector, a handful of companies now control the entire market, giving you the illusion of choice while rigging the prices behind closed doors. Let's take groceries. You think you're choosing between dozens of brands at the store? Nope. Over asterisk 80% of the food you buy is controlled by just four mega corporations: Nestle, PepsiCo, Unilever, and General Mills. Same with meat. In the US, four companies control 85% of beef processing, which is why you see beef prices rising while ranchers are getting squeezed. And don't even get me started on big tech. Amazon alone controls 40% of US e-commerce, and it uses that dominance to force sellers into unfair terms, collect data on competitors, and undercut prices until the competition dies. Then, prices shoot up. This is what economists call monopsony power, where a few buyers dictate terms to everyone. It's anti-competitive, it's predatory, and it's 100% legal, because the FTC and DOJ enforcement budgets have been gutted since the 1980s. And guess who lobbied for that? The very corporations that now write the rules. When prices go up and quality goes down, you blame inflation. But this isn't inflation, it's price manipulation under the mask of efficiency. Meanwhile, your wages don't stretch any further, and you're forced into a cycle where you can't afford alternatives. You think the free market is working for you? It's working perfectly for them. You're the mark, and they've rigged every aisle, every checkout, every brand label to extract as much as possible from your shrinking wallet. 7. Healthcare isn't a service anymore. It's a racket with a death toll. You want to know how broken the system is? Just get sick in America. Go ahead, break an arm, get cancer, need insulin, and you'll see firsthand that our healthcare system doesn't exist to heal you. It exists to bill you until you're bankrupt or dead, whichever comes first. The US spends $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare, more than any other developed nation. Yet our life expectancy is 5 years lower than countries that spend half as much. Why? Because healthcare here isn't about outcomes, it's about revenue streams. Hospitals now hire more billing specialists than doctors. Pharmaceutical companies set drug prices not based on cost, but on what they think you'll pay before dying. Insulin costs $6 to produce, but sells for over $300 a vial, and people die without it every day. It's criminal. And private insurers? They're not there to protect you. They're there to deny care, because every claim they reject is profit. Denial rates have quietly risen, with some insurers rejecting over 17% of all claims, even as premiums skyrocket. You pay more every year for less access, fewer choices, and worse results. And if you're uninsured, one trip to the ER can cost you $10,000 to $20,000. Easy. That's if you survive. Medical debt is now the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America, and it disproportionately affects low-income families, minorities, and single parents. The rich? They don't worry. They pay cash or get concierge care. The rest of us navigate deductibles, co-pays, provider networks, and pre-approvals like a Kafkaesque maze with our lives on the line. This isn't a healthcare system. It's a racket, a profit-maximizing death factory designed to extract from the sick, the desperate, and the uninsured. And until you realize that, you'll keep thinking you're a patient when you're really just a revenue opportunity. 6. The dollar you save is a dollar that's losing value, and they know it. You've been told your whole life to save money, put 10% away, build an emergency fund, be disciplined. But here's the truth. No banker, no teacher, no financial guru on mainstream TV will ever tell you the dollar you save is designed to decay. It's engineered to lose purchasing power every year. That's not paranoia. That's U.S. monetary policy. The Federal Reserve openly targets a 2% inflation rate annually, which means your savings lose 2% of their value every single year by design. And in 2022 to 2023, inflation didn't just hit 2%. It exploded past 9%, the highest in 4 decades. So if you had $10,000 saved in cash or in a 0.5% savings account, you lost $900 in purchasing power in a single year. And what did the Fed do? They raised interest rates, but not to help you. They did it to protect the bond market and suppress wage growth, because wage inflation is seen as a threat to corporate profits. Meanwhile, high interest rates crushed mortgage affordability, credit card interest exploded past 24%, and small businesses lost access to credit. So who benefits? The government does. Because inflation erodes the real value of its debt. And the wealthy? They own hard assets. Stocks, gold, real estate, collectibles. These inflate with inflation. But you're told to be responsible and keep cash in the bank where it quietly rots. The banks take your money, lend it out at high interest, invest it, and pocket the spread. And when things collapse, They get bailed out with your tax dollars. You think you're saving, but in reality, you're donating purchasing power to the system, because the system isn't built to reward savers. It's built to protect asset holders and punish wage earners and cash holders. 5. You're tracked, profiled, and scored. Not for safety, but to monetize your existence. You probably think data privacy is about keeping your information secure. Wrong. In reality, your personal data is the most valuable commodity in the world, and the system harvests it 24/7 to build a digital replica of you that it can sell, manipulate, and use to control your decisions without your consent. This isn't science fiction. As of 2025, over 5,000 data points are collected on the average American by brokers like Axiom, Oracle, and Experian. Your location, spending habits, browser history, social media activity, even your emotional state, all of it is tracked in real time. And then it's sold to advertisers, lenders, insurers, and political campaigns. What you see online, tailored, the ads, manipulated, the job opportunities that show up for you, filtered based on algorithmic profiling. This is algorithmic redlining, and it's already happening. Poor zip code, fewer loan offers, minority demographic, higher insurance rates. And here's where it gets sinister. Some companies now use predictive scoring to determine your creditworthiness based on unrelated behavior. Did you buy fast food 3 times this week? That might indicate impulsiveness, lower your internal trust score. Your data becomes a weapon used to deny you opportunity, access, and fairness, all without your knowledge, and you can't opt out. Even if you delete Facebook or refuse cookies, your phone still pings towers, your apps sell your data, and your face is scanned at airports and in retail stores. You're not a citizen in this system. You're a product with a value tag that fluctuates in secret. And the worst part? None of this is illegal. Because data regulation in the US is 30 years behind Europe. Your digital self is a goldmine, and they've spent billions to ensure you never get a cut. Because surveillance isn't about safety, it's about monetization and control. 4. You're addicted to convenience, and they've turned that addiction into a leash. We need to talk about convenience, because it's not just a feature of modern life. It's the new form of economic control. Every time you tap to pay, auto-ship a product, subscribe to a service, or log in with your Google account, you're not saving time, you're surrendering autonomy. And the system knows it. Amazon's Buy Now button? Psychological manipulation. It removes friction, bypasses critical thinking, and trains your brain to consume impulsively. And it's not just Amazon. It's Netflix, DoorDash, Uber, Apple Pay. Every platform is engineered by behavioral scientists and AI optimization models to increase engagement, reduce resistance, and build a neural pathway between your desire and their profits. They don't want customers, they want habits. But here's the catch. Once convenience becomes the default, choice disappears. Try living without Amazon Prime or a smartphone and see how fast the world becomes inaccessible. You're not opting in anymore. You're trapped. And the cost of that convenience? Subscriptions, fees, auto-renewals, data tracking, dependency. You now pay monthly for things you used to own, software, movies, even your car's features. BMW literally charges a monthly fee for heated seats. And that's the future. Ownership disappears, and everything becomes a service, leased back to you forever. You think it's harmless? It's a business model called end-shitification. Platforms get good to attract users, then worse to extract maximum value. They lock you in, then bleed you dry. And by the time you notice, it's too late. You're so accustomed to the shortcut that reclaiming your freedom feels like punishment. This isn't innovation. It's engineered addiction. And it turns you from a participant in the economy into a tethered resource, mined for time, money, and attention. 3. The legal system doesn't protect you. It protects capital from you. Let's get one thing straight. The legal system wasn't built to give you justice. It was built to maintain order and protect capital. And when those two goals collide, guess which one wins? You see this everywhere. Corporate crimes that destroy lives, environmental poisoning, wage theft, medical fraud, are often settled with a fine, no jail time, no personal accountability. But steal a loaf of bread, fall behind on rent, or get pulled over while poor? Suddenly the full weight of the justice system comes down on you like a hammer. Let's talk facts. In the US, over 80% of criminal defendants are too poor to afford an attorney, so they rely on overburdened public defenders with hundreds of open cases. And because going to trial takes time and money, 95% of cases are resolved by plea deal, meaning people plead guilty not because they are, but because they can't afford to fight. Meanwhile, corporate entities hire entire legal teams to delay, intimidate, and outspend justice. Consider this. In 2023, Wells Fargo paid over $1 billion in fines for fraudulent practices. Did any executives go to jail? Not one. But thousands of poor people sit in jails right now for non-violent offenses that cost less than $500. The courts don't enforce equality. They enforce class hierarchy. And civil cases? Don't even bother suing unless you've got tens of thousands in legal fees ready to burn. Corporations use arbitration clauses to prevent lawsuits. Judges with financial interests rule on cases involving companies they own stock in. The system is incestuous and entirely legal. You were taught the law is blind, but it sees just fine, and it sees your net worth. That determines what justice you can afford. Not truth, not fairness, just capital. And capital always wins. 2. That's the core function of the system. Your productivity, your time, your effort, it's all extracted, monetized, and then funneled upward. In 2023, U.S. worker productivity increased by 3.7%, while real wages fell 1.2%. That means you produced more value, but you got paid less for it. Where did the extra profit go? Straight to the top. Executives, shareholders, private equity firms. If you work a 40-hour week, odds are you produce about $5,000 to $7,000 worth of value for your company, but only see a fraction of that in your paycheck. The rest? Captured as margin. If you think your wage is tied to your value, you're living in a fantasy. It's tied to your replaceability. That's why teachers and nurses are underpaid and CEOs earn 300x more. Not because the CEO works harder, but because capital markets treat labor like a commodity, and you, my friend, are just the cheapest input. It gets worse. Most companies now use time tracking software, algorithmic scheduling, productivity monitoring, and AI performance scoring to squeeze every ounce out of your day while automating away your bargaining power. And if you try to push back, they offshore the job or fire you and rehire as a contractor. You're not an employee, you're an expense line on a spreadsheet, and the goal is to shrink you as much as possible. But here's the kicker. Every hour you work, you're also not building for yourself. You're not starting your business, not investing, not creating, because the system keeps you too tired, too underpaid, and too insecure to take that risk. You think you're earning a living, but you're just fueling someone else's fortune. 1. Freedom is the illusion they sell to keep you obedient. Ready for the final blow? You think you're free, but every major decision in your life, where you live, what you eat, who you vote for, what you believe, is shaped by forces you don't control and barely perceive. You were born into a structure of debt, surveillance, manipulated markets, censored information, and psychological conditioning. That's not freedom. That's a managed illusion of choice. You think voting makes a difference? In 2020 alone, over $14 billion was spent on federal elections, and over 90% of winners were the candidates who raised the most money. That's not democracy. That's auction politics. You think the media informs you? 6 corporations own 90% of all U.S. media, and their job is to protect advertisers and investors, not tell you the truth. You think your beliefs are your own? Algorithms shape your feed. The outrage is curated. The facts are filtered. Every opinion you form is nudged by platforms built to hack your psychology for profit. And you think you're free because you can choose between Coke and Pepsi? That's not freedom, that's branding. Real freedom would mean economic sovereignty, owning your labor, your home, your time. But most people don't even own their car. They lease it, rent their home, finance their phone, borrow for school, and work for someone else. You're free the way a hamster is free in a wheel, unrestrained but never escaping, because the true cage is invisible. It's made of debt, fear, routine, and media distortion. And the moment you start asking questions, why everything feels harder, why you never get ahead, why your freedoms shrink as your productivity grows, they tell you it's your fault. That's the final mechanism of control, convincing you the game is fair when it was rigged before you were even born. Now you know. This isn't about laziness. This isn't about bad budgeting or not grinding hard enough. This is about a system older than you, deeper than you, colder than you, that was built to extract your labor, your time, and your future and sell it back to you at interest. The average American will work over 90,000 hours in their lifetime and retire with just $70,000 in savings. That's not failure. That's theft. And while you're drowning in student loans, paying $1,800 for rent, and watching your grocery bill double, billionaires are tripling their wealth during economic crises. They don't want you to fight back. They want you numb, distracted, divided. But now you see the rigging. Now you understand why you're stuck. And once you see the bars, you can't unsee the cage. Don't let this die in your feed. Share it, talk about it, wake people up. Because if we don't expose the machine, we stay the fuel.